Today we concluded day 3 of the Magnus Carlsen Tour Finals. Going into today, Hikaru Nakamura had a 2-0 lead against Daniel Dubov, and Magnus Carlsen struck back against Ding Liren and evened it out 1-1. Today's match against Ding Liren, Magnus was a superstar, and just like the thumbnail and the title of this video says, he won 2 beautiful games in the Sicilian defense, both on the white and black side. I wanted to share them with you and update you on the overall standing of the event. So let's jump into it. In the second game, Magnus Carlsen had the white pieces, and well, true to the name of the video, we have a Najdorf Sicilian. Not something that I recommend for both beginners and intermediate level players. It's just a little bit too dense. Some of the theory is completely astounding. So for those of you that just want to sit back and get a bit of a masterclass, well, you are in the right place. Magnus plays bishop e3, which is one of the main lines. Bishop g5 is the other. e5 now, the big question in the Najdorf is whether or not black plays e5 or whether black plays e6. Knight b3, bishop e6, queen d2. Magnus is getting his intentions out very early. He'd like to castle on the queen side. And Ding Liren plays bishop e7. Magnus plays f3. This is just a preparation kind of move. Maybe you have g4 in mind, and also you stop the knight from going to g4. You see this structure oftentimes in an opening like the dragon as well. And now black plays h5. This is a very modern wrinkle in the Najdorf. If you look at the database, there's a ton of grandmasters who play this. Jan Nepomniachtchi being one of them. He actually plays this a lot. And it looks kind of strange because normally you're supposed to castle. Well, in this game, black actually, spoiler alert, will end up castling, for better or worse. But h5 is played. Bishop e2 just developing, knight d7, and now a very common Najdorf move. Again, the central square on d5, white jumps in, and black makes this capture. Now, this is apparently theory. This has been played over 100 times, but to me it still looks very strange because black trades off the light-squared bishop and doesn't have really good replacement pawns. Normally, when you trade off a light-squared bishop, you want to replace that light-squared bishop with light-squared pawns. In this case, this bishop doesn't look particularly good. This structure of this setup, I should say, of knights is a bit peculiar. Like, this knight can't really go forward, and this knight can't really go forward either. I mean, it's just targeted by this bishop, and you've already moved this h-pawn. But apparently this is theory. Right up until this moment, here Ding Liren played b6. There's a lot of moves in the database, but b6 almost never gets played, and very quickly the players are completely on their own. Magnus queenside castles, queen c7 by Ding, lining up against the king, and just king b1, always a useful move, and b5. There's a lot of ways to play this position with the white pieces. Here during commentary, I was deliberating with Anna Rudolph what white should do. Should white go for a queen trade on a5? Should white just play knight a5? Should white play c4? Should white play g4? I actually really like the move g4, essentially looking for a trade and trying to start an attack on this side of the board. Magnus plays knight a5 and looks for an improvement square of his knight to c6, knight b6, and here a fascinating move. Bishop b6, queen b6, knight c6. It looks like this trade doesn't make any sense because the bishop is so strong. And normally the answer is very much exactly what I said. I mean, you don't need to trade that bishop for the knight unless you have a very good reason to do so. But the knights were threatening the central pawn. And when white takes on b6, black's most powerful, and I should say most active piece, is now gone. The knight on b6 is gone. Neither of these pieces leaves a good impression. And, oh, excuse me, that move was not played in the game. But I should say the knight jumping into c6 is very nice for white, and white has a very clear advantage. Bishop d8. And so now you need to look at the 2 pawn breaks in the position, c4 or g4, or actually f4 also works, to open the position because black's king is in the center of the board. And that's exactly what Magnus does. He plays c4, he activates his bishop, castles, rook e1, knight d7, and now that Ding Liren has moved a piece away from the king, try to find the move here. You have already seen it, is kind of my hint. Try to find the move here, which starts some sort of attack, opens up the lines to the enemy king. I will wait 5 seconds. I will take a sip of my peach pear LaCroix. That's how I pronounce it, by the way. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it. g4, excellent. Takes, bishop h4, and, well, the rook is under attack, so obviously Magnus moves it to g1. No, Magnus plays g5, which is the engine's top recommendation, and is essentially saying that, dude, I don't really care if you take on e1, not actually because I'm going to take or take, but because of what? Very good. This is why you should always look for checks. Knight e7 check, and we actually have Anastasia's mate. If king here, we have queen d3 check, and queen h3 and queen h6, and if the king goes to h8, whoop, I just teleported all the pieces. If we get king h8, queen e1, you cannot stop Anastasia's mate, okay? So a completely crushing attack there, and that is why you cannot take g6, rook f1, king g7, and Magnus begins transferring the queen over and the rook over as well. Over the course of the next like 10 or 15 moves, Magnus does end up getting a decisive advantage in converting it, but not without any fireworks. Queen g4, and it was right at this moment, actually a move ago, instead of rook f3, Magnus could have played the stunning move rook takes f7. I'm not sure what he overlooked or if he didn't consider this option, but sacrificing the rook does win him the game. Queen e6 check. Now with king g7, you have not queen e7, but the queen e7 also works, but knight e7 with the attack on g6, and there's no way to defend that. If you play knight f8, I play queen f6, and I mate you. Actually, that is just checkmate. And again, there's just no way to defend this pawn. If you take the bishop, I take on g6. If you play king f8, I play knight f5, and there's no way to prevent me from checkmating you. Even if you throw in one more check, the king simply goes to the corner, and you are not going to stop queen g7. Again, bishop takes g5, I check you, I pick up your rook, I take all your pieces. So rook takes f7 was not played in the game, and instead we got f5, but Magnus still brought all of his pieces to the g-file, as you should when you are attacking, and the rest of the game is just simply him converting, trying to play on both sides of the board, but in Magnesian style, in the time trouble. He actually simplified it into an opposite-colored bishop endgame and ended up winning more of an opposite-colored bishop endgame than anything else. Although if he had found rook takes f7, this would have been a beautiful, beautiful win. It's just that he suffered a little road bump, speed bump, as we say. But his handling of the Sicilian middle game was very, very impressive. And this position is just completely winning for white. Even though it's bishop and 3 versus bishop and 3, there is no way to prevent these pawns from coming forward, and that's really exactly what Magnus did. He plays the pawn, brings the king all the way up the side of the board, and here Ding Liren was forced to resign. But it was the middle game maneuvering, playing on both sides of the board with c4 and g4, and Magnus was victorious. In their next game, it was actually Magnus who had the black pieces, and, well, we have a Najdorf, except it's Magnus Carlsen who is on the other side now. And after bishop e3, Magnus doesn't go for e5, instead opting for this e6 setup, so you can learn on both sides here. f3, b5. So kind of a similar approach from Ding Liren. Ding plays actually very similar moves. Queen d2, g4. a3 was not played by Magnus, but also e6 was not included in that game. Knight d7, long castles, and instead of developing his bishop and trying to castle, Magnus puts the rook across the enemy king with the move rook c8. Very logical move. King b1, and now a move that should break the rules of chess. I always teach all folks that if you are not yet castled, you should not be opening the center, unless you're Magnus Carlsen. And he plays the move d5, which looks a little bit counterintuitive, because again, you're opening the center with the king there. But after this trade, somehow there's just no way for white to do much of anything. White cannot take. White does have this move knight f5, but that move doesn't really carry a threat. If you take the knight, then yes, that move is completely justified. But I'm just going to go here and laugh in your face and triple fork you, and, well, kind of maybe quadruple fork. What would you call a quadruple fork? I don't really know, but it is the bishop attacking 3 and the pawn attacking 1. And so for that reason, Ding Liren played rook g1. And now we see Magnus develop another piece, f4, and take advantage of literally every single move that Ding Liren plays. So we get f4, Magnus sees the opening on e4 and plays knight f6, bishop d3, and jumps into e4. This was the one moment of the game that the engine didn't like Magnus's position. It was saying that he was too risky, and there was a sequence of moves here that Ding Liren could have played, which could have given him an advantage. First you trade, and then you jump in with this crazy move, knight e6. If f takes e6, then I take your bishop and I'm opening up here, so Magnus would have to sacrifice back on c2 with a check and get sort of this position and then defend his pawn here. I don't know if he saw that. I don't know how much calculating the players got into this variation, but I'll tell you what. In the game, that did not happen, and instead we got h4 from Ding, throwing every single pawn forward. Magnus, understanding the dangers of the position, reinforces the knight on e4 away from any danger, and the other idea of the queen on b7 is to always prepare the move b4, because that's how you attack the king on that side of the board. So c3, and now the house comes crashing down for Ding Liren. You can pause here, take a breath. What did Magnus Carlsen play in order to shatter Ding's defenses? Bishop takes a3. A ridiculous move, but the best move, not a bad move, just like, wow. Well, it's kind of funny because Ding Liren walked right into it. If you take, I'm simply taking on c3, my rook is protecting, and everything is falling apart. b4 is next. So Ding Liren tries to ignore his house crashing and tries to crash Magnus's house instead. Magnus plays b4, Ding Liren responds with c4 and knight c3. Magnus voluntarily walks into a fork of his own pieces, but white just can't take that because the queen would jump in and there would be mate. After king a1, Magnus continues to chip away, pawn takes e6, and like a true Triple Crown world champion, Magnus follows the principles of chess and castles on move 24. A very classy move, activating his rook, which has not been part of the game, hiding his king, and, well, if pawn takes f7, as we will see, the queen just takes and the king is completely safe. A very, very funny move. Understanding there's no rush on the queen side. The capture on c4, rook d2, and now Magnus finally forces something to be done on the b2 square. Bishop takes b2. King takes b2, and probably the most advanced move of the game, if I had to pick one, Magnus plays b3. Cool, calm, and collected. He does not rush with knight a4 check, although if you do plug this into a stockfish, it does say that this is the best move, but he plays b3, and he's basically going to make this move happen no matter what. And then the pawn is going to promote. So we got e takes f7, queen takes f7, knight takes b3, and now black to move, finish it off, and take a 2-1 lead over Ding Liren. The floor is yours, dear viewer. Very good. There's a king on the other side, so we have to play rook b4, and Ding Liren resigned because there is no way to protect. You can win this knight, but you can also suffer checkmate in one move. And so, Magnus Carlsen won the mini-match 2.5 to half, demonstrating excellence on both sides of the Najdorf Sicilian, showing that he plays not just the Sveshnikov, but the Najdorf as well with both colors. 2.5 half, 2-1 overall, and it was also today that Hikaru Nakamura knocked out Daniel Dubov with a convincing 3-0 victory, securing a spot in the finals, an $80,000 minimum prize, and awaiting the winner of Magnus versus Ding Liren. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, all the useful plugs are in the description. 2 videos will appear on the left side for your choosing and for your liking. Leave me a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.